Today, we're going to take a look at the infamous Diddy trial and all of the nightmarish claims that have come out of this year-long event. Unfortunately, the trial of the decade, with the worst crimes you've heard about being brought out front and center, the final verdict didn't turn out at all like we hoped it would. Justice, I'm afraid, doesn't count for those who have the fame, the money, and the damning tapes that have a vice grip on equally guilty, powerful people. Now, since a lot of us here are already sort of familiar with the background on Diddy, or Puff Daddy, or Sean Combs, or whatever name he's going by in this decade, I'll keep the background on this short. But it's still important to have a proper overview of the matter, since there's a whole lot of misinformation out there and quite a few years of illegalities to muddy the waters. Diddy was hugely successful in the 90s and early 2000s with his music. I mean, who doesn't recognize the banger, "I'll Be Missing You"? Only, that's not where his vast millions or billions, depending on what estimations you believe, came from. The music's almost a side hustle when you realize just how many artists his record label, Bad Boy Records, had on his books. Craig Mack, Faith Evans, the Notorious B.I.G., Machine Gun Kelly, and The Lox, just to name a few. It's not like Diddy ever flew under the radar for his questionable behavior either. Beating his girlfriends, throwing parties that involved illegal substances, money laundering, and even involvement in the deaths of legends Tupac Shakur and Biggie, the Notorious B.I.G. Nothing's ever been proven, and a whole lot of it's hearsay, rumors, and whispers behind the champagne glasses and the flash of cameras. That's kind of what Diddy's always been, a larger-than-life character that flaunted his wealth and power as loudly as possible. But that's kind of the best way to hide behind any illegal activity. The mob did it back in the 40s, and billionaires have been doing it for centuries. Let the flash and glamour take up the attention so that your sins could disappear in the shadows. Let's get back to those infamous wild parties, though, because that's where a lot of the allegations take place. The white parties, as they were called, were exclusive events that required all invitees to wear all white for aesthetic purposes. They were lavish beyond belief. Naked girls on tables with sushi spread over their bodies for guests to eat off of, wild animal attractions, superstar performances, and champagne fountains. You name the extravagant expenditure, Diddy's white parties came with all the whistles and cogs, and that was just the precursor to the parties, the part that the press were invited for. At a certain point in the night, the majority of the guests would be escorted out, leaving a select few behind for the real party. And that's where it's rumored where unwilling women, underage girls and boys, and even hopeful musical stars were abused beyond belief. The level of excess has been likened to ritualistic debauchery, excessive overindulgence, and all the things that catered to man's vices. Only those indulgences were dialed up to 11 at the white parties. Major stars at these after parties included the likes of Jay-Z, Beyonce, Drake, Justin Bieber, Usher, Ashton Kutcher, and Demi Moore, Tom Cruise, the Kardashians, and Leonardo DiCaprio. Some of them, like Usher and Justin Bieber, were reportedly not brought in as guests, but instead were abused themselves. And those that weren't on the exclusive list scrambled to get on it even if the rumors were hair-raising. Hollywood doesn't care how disgusting it is. If it's exclusive, then those vapid camera vultures want in on the action. Again, the rumors of Justin and Usher's sexual assaults are just that, alleged occurrences. Almost none of the rumored celebrity victims have come forward to file lawsuits, nor have they openly confirmed that any of it happened. But those that were named as regular guests that indulged willingly were celebrities like Ashton Kutcher, Jay-Z, Beyonce, and DiCaprio left the United States in the weeks after this whole debacle became public, for long holidays in foreign countries for months at a time. Convenient, wouldn't you say? The timing and their unusually long breaks from filming projects certainly gave the public enough fodder to speculate that they were fleeing from the law. Big names like Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, and several others either denied that they ever attended the parties, even though photographic evidence proved that they were there, or they refused to acknowledge demands for answers. The fact is, the after-hours parties did happen. Diddy liked to call them freak-offs, and too many people have come out to say that there was a great deal of open sexual debaucheries going on to deny that sex and exploitation was the purpose of these parties. It's not like people haven't been warning the public about Diddy. On the contrary, Cat Williams, Jaguar Wright both put their careers on the line with their public statements, calling Diddy a handler and dangerous center point for exploitation, and that his parties were the epicenter of everything that's wrong with Hollywood. By the whistleblower's accounts, Diddy makes Jeffrey Epstein look tame, and the tapes he has hidden somewhere of all these awful parties and the victims of them is enough to make some very powerful people very nervous. We'll get back to the parties in just a second. First, we need to fast forward to 2023, 5 years after Diddy and Cassie Ventura broke up. Cassie started dating Diddy in 2007, right after being signed to his record label and after releasing just one single. She was always at his side, the dutiful and loyal girlfriend of a billionaire music mogul. No one could quite understand why she never released more music after that first, very successful single. She was beautiful, talented, and clearly had the support of one of the biggest names in the industry to steamroll her career. They dated for 11 years, and no one could quite believe it when the two broke up. After all, they seemed so happy in all their press photos. The reasons became clear when Cassie filed that lawsuit in November of 2023. Cassie filed a federal lawsuit in Manhattan, accusing Diddy of sexual assault, physical abuse, and sex trafficking during the span of their relationship. Instead of the promised record deal, Diddy intentionally kept Cassie out of the music industry for their entire relationship. She claimed that he fed her copious amounts of drugs, kept her addicted, and if she still resisted, he'd beat her into compliance. He'd make her sleep with multiple men at a time while he filmed the entire ordeal and made it his mission to break Cassie down into a subservient sex slave that catered to his every sick desire. And every time she tried to leave, he threatened to kill her, even going so far as to kick her out of a moving car and following her to wherever she fled to, only to set her possessions on fire. The lawsuit was settled out of court the very next day, but this set off a chain reaction, resulting in numerous victims coming forward with their own lawsuits, all mirroring Cassie's claims. In total, a whopping 120 additional lawsuits were filed, ranging from sex trafficking to sexual assault, kidnapping, forced labor, racketeering, and psychological abuse. A lot of the lawsuits were filed by both male and female plaintiffs, some of whom were underage at the time that their assaults occurred. Some were drugged, recorded, and shown the videos later to blackmail them into compliance. And others claim that these kinds of drug-induced recording tactics were used on music executives, artists, and other celebrities to blackmail them into signing off clients and deals over to Diddy's record label, keeping him firmly at the top and in control of the upper heads in the music and advertising industries. One of these lawsuits came from musician Derek D. Rex Smith, who alleged that Diddy sexually assaulted him multiple times when he was a teenager. Diddy never bothered to show up for the court date, forcing the court to grant D. Rex the full $100 million settlement. By now, the diddler was bleeding cash just to make the plaintiffs disappear. The rumors started spreading. People who attended the parties leaked horrendous accounts of beatings, assaults, drugs, excruciating initiations of people hoping to make it in the music industry, and even underage human trafficking. And those that didn't comply were forcefully led into rooms where they were assaulted for days on end, kept awake with a cocktail of dangerous drugs and beaten, or threatened with the videotapes of their involvement if they refused to participate. For the time being, as the lawsuits kept streaming in, the FBI raided Diddy's mansions, the places where most of these freak-offs were held. Look, this case was already enormous, but this raid shot it straight into the stratosphere. Inside the mansions, they found an inordinate amount of drugs, parts to AR-15 style rifles, photos of Cassie Ventura's injuries, including bruises, gashes, and black eyes. They also found some very alarming items that weren't entirely illegal, but very incriminating nonetheless, like IV fluid bags and medical supplies that were reportedly used to rehydrate participants after these events, suggesting prolonged physical exertion and drug use, and over 1,000 bottles of baby oil, personal lubricants, condoms, lingerie, stilettos, and sex toys. Most disturbingly of all, an unnatural amount of surveillance equipment spread across every inch of the properties. Let's just say that these last items definitely lean towards the days-long freak-offs being completely true, and the drugs, weapons, and photographic evidence indicated that extreme violence was used to keep unwilling participants in line. Only there were no tapes and no electronic record of whatever the surveillance equipment ever caught. Diddy cleaned house as soon as Cassie filed her lawsuit, almost like he knew it was coming. Every electronic device was wiped clean before the police showed up. If he was willing to put all his resources into making those videos disappear before bothering to get rid of incriminating items like drugs and guns, what terrible things must have been on them that he'd rather deal with narcotics and weapons charges instead of the contents of those tapes. The raid concluded with the arrest of both Diddy's sons, Christian and Justin, and a video leaked of Cassie running for her life in a hotel hallway only to be chased down by Diddy and viciously beaten and kicked while she lay cowering on the ground. So at least some of what Cassie claimed was true. The proof was right there on the screen. At this point, Diddy didn't have a lot of supporters left anymore. All his celebrity buddies had gone underground or completely left the country, and his adult sons were in jail. So he tried to gain some favor by putting out a public apology, claiming that he was terribly messed up for treating Cassie so violently, but that none of the other allegations were true. Not that it helped much. The world wasn't just ready to burn every record that had his name on it. They wanted him brought to justice for all the other hundreds of alleged crimes he'd committed. Not long after that apology video, Diddy was officially arrested for racketeering. The FBI put out a statement stating that he used his record label as a front for human trafficking, fraud, narcotics, forced labor, arson, kidnapping, and bribery. The lawsuit commenced, but the public were banned from attending it. Reporters and media outlets were barred from the courtroom, and it wasn't streamed like most court proceedings are nowadays. Understandable. There was already so much false information and insane publicity surrounding Diddy and his dalliances that the courts really didn't have any choice but to shut the public out until a verdict could be reached. The majority of the 120 lawsuits were dismissed due to lack of evidence or witnesses and accusers simply backing out of testifying on the stand. Now, why would an accuser who went to the trouble of filing a lawsuit just back out at the last minute? Witness intimidation and tampering was definitely a serious concern after these people went mum. Even more so when one key witness disappeared off the face of the earth before the trial began in May 2025. The U.S. Attorney's Office still hasn't been able to locate this individual. Cassie did take the stand, as well as former girlfriend, hotel employees, former employees of Diddy, 2 male escorts, and artist Kid Cudi, who testified that Diddy broke into his home to firebomb his Porsche after learning he dated Cassie. None of the witnesses painted Diddy in a gray light. Testimony that he beat, strangled, and kicked Cassie, as well as several other women, were too many to count. Throwing glass bottles, using his fist, and even using a burning hot pan straight from the stove to hit Cassie with after she wasn't fast enough to prepare him breakfast. The male escorts said that they were paid to have sex with Cassie on numerous occasions while being filmed, and witnessed him beating Cassie for not acting out the scene according to the instructions he was shouting from behind the camera. And the employees all reported physical and sexual assaults, including groping, dragging women by the hair, threatening them with guns, and throwing heavy objects at them. 2 former employees were kidnapped by Diddy personally. By their accounts, living under the Diddy empire was absolute hell. How he'd gotten away with it for so long is mind-boggling. Some of the lawsuits were settled by Diddy's legal team out of court, meaning that he paid boatloads of money for them to drop the charges. There are still a small handful of those lawsuits pending, but since they're all civil suits, his legal team will probably end up stretching them out for so long that those who want justice end up being drained financially, forcing them to back out. We'll just have to wait and see what happens to those last few lawsuits. The defense had no witnesses willing to testify either. Diddy had absolutely no one in his corner, and the ones on the other side who could bring him down was staying away from the proceedings, apparently for fear of their lives. A few of the federal charges were dropped too, but at least they got a few to trial. Those charges were racketeering, 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. The racketeering charge was the heftiest of the 5 charges and could have ended up with a life sentence if he was found guilty on it. Unfortunately, he was found not guilty on 3 of the 5 charges. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury came back. The only charges he was found guilty of were the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, and not guilty on the racketeering charge or the 2 counts of sex trafficking. Now, the charges that he was found guilty do carry a maximum of 10 years each, depending on the severity and the judge's mood that day. In the end, the judge decided to fall somewhere in the middle, sentencing the diddler to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, with the 12 months already spent in holding, so he'll be spending 3 years in jail at most. The man who was once considered the king of hip-hop fell to his knees when he heard the news, bawling his eyes out like a child. This guy, who was once an unshakable, feared, and manic dictator in the industry, was reduced to a blubbering mess over just 4 years, a sentence that is actually a slap on the wrist, given what he's been accused of. He offered the courts $50 million to allow him out on bail with a lengthier parole period, but he's been denied, as has all of his appeals. There's rumors that he's even tried to send requests to President Trump, begging the president to pardon him. For once, his copious amounts of money that always made his problems go away isn't helping him at all. Still, even if it's a cupcake facility, better than any other regular Joe could dream of getting, he's been labeled a child predator, especially one of this level of fame. And that doesn't go over well with the prisoners, no matter what facility you're in. Diddy's not looking forward to a good time in prison, that's for sure. Now, after 120 people, all with their own stories of horrendous, sickening assaults, deeply disturbing kidnappings, death threats, and threats to release their revenge porn tapes, what if this guy really is responsible for dozens, if not hundreds, of deviant crimes that invoke extreme levels of violence and extortion? There is a whole lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that these perverted acts, some of them against children as young as 13, were true. The baby oil, the weapons and drugs, and the multitude of witnesses to see these crimes. Not to mention that a lot of these victims have physical proof that they were around Diddy at the time that they claim their assaults took place. At the very least, some of the men and women were forcibly made to participate under serious threat of their lives. There's also been dozens of artists that have come forward about his tactics in business that weren't just sketchy, but downright illegal. The contracts that these artists were made to sign under duress were so exploitative that it makes Hollywood's mistreatment of Child Act look tame. Rapper Mace and the Lox contracts barred them from collecting any of the millions their music made for the record label, leaving them in poverty while their music topped the charts. Then there's the matter of the missing footage that Diddy had scrubbed before his arrest. If minors were filmed in these freak-off parties, or the celebrities that were active participants in the abuse of those minors, well, we're talking about a completely different set of sins that'll burn almost all of Hollywood to the ground if the videos ever reach the light of day. And that's where the real question lies. How many more Diddys are out there? First Jeffrey Epstein, now Diddy. Not to mention the alarming amount of proven abuse of women and children in the entertainment industry since the 1920s. It's been this way since moving film burst onto the scene. The only difference is that now it's gotten more hidden from the public eye than ever before. Diddy's trial and all of his alleged sins are just the surface of a global problem. The mega rich that treat people like livestock, forcing them to make these elites richer to satisfy their sick desires, and an underbelly of control, exploitation, and a group of people who believe that their money puts them above the law and basic human morality. I hope Diddy is just the beginning. We know there are more predators out there, more monsters that need to be brought to justice. But if 4 years is all that this level of evil is going to get, well then, I don't know if the might of the law is going to do any of the victims much good after all. All we can do now is hope that the last handful of lawsuits add a little time to that meager sentence he got in the end. But what do you think? Are all of these lawsuits just vultures jumping on the bandwagon, hoping for a fat payout, like Diddy's lawyers claim they are? Or are all the stories true? Diddy's the ultimate predatory monster, alongside almost every actor, singer, and entertainer that are splashed over our screens every day. Personally, I'll take the latter of those opinions. But you know how this goes. Now you get to tell me what your thoughts are. And leave a like and remember to subscribe while you're at it. See you in the next one, people.